Expressed on this program are those of the commenters alone. They do not represent the views or opinions of Valley News Live, our parent company, or our advertisers.
Welcome back. With me tonight in the Hot Box, Congressman Kevin Cramer. Kevin, welcome back to North Dakota.
Great to be back.
You had your American Issues Forum taking place today. We will get to that in a few moments. I want to start with you. Just heard me talking about sequestration.
Yeah.
Maybe you know something that we don't, because you said, hey, I'm going to go on recess. We'll figure this out later. Does sequestration take place on March 1st?
Well, I'm quite certain it will, but people should understand what sequestration is. Sequestration are automatic spending cuts that take place as a result of a negotiation between Barack Obama and the last Congress. And Barack Obama invented sequestration. He pushed sequestration. He signed it into law. And the automatic spending cuts, I think we need to put in perspective. $85 billion, 2% of the federal budget. And we're having a, high old time worrying about cutting 2% of the federal budget. He wants tax increases to cover that 2%, and we're dealing with a $16.5 trillion debt.
Yeah, but you've got
this
Secretary
country.
of Defense Leon Panetta saying, hey, we cannot afford these cuts to the military. You're saying that.
Here's what I'm saying. Here's what we're going to do. If, in fact, sequestration happens, I believe it probably will, because the president doesn't want to negotiate targeted cuts. Congress has passed twice targeted cuts that replace sequestration. He doesn't want any part of it. He'd like, I think, to have the political gain of a sequestration. We will pass in the continuing resolution.
For a second, please, sir, because you say political gain. We all know this is going to create more instability in the economy. What's there to gain for him unless it gets pinned on you guys?
There's not anything that can hurt our economy more than a $17 trillion debt. We are about to become Greece. That is a bigger drain on the economy, not to mention the security of our children. We are balancing the books on the backs of our children's bank. That's way worse than the economy than 2% budget cuts. But let me put it this way. We will also pass continuing resolution. Continuing resolution is that's the way we've been budgeting the last several years, because the Democrat-controlled Senate won't pass a budget. So continuing resolution is continuing current spending. We will pass that on March 1st. It will take us to the end of the year with sequestration, but we are going to give the president the authority to target the cuts. It's called reprogramming, it's called discretion, whatever you want to call it. But reprogramming authority says, okay, Mr. President, let's not fire the firefighters and the jet pilots and the meat inspectors. Let's go to the bottom of that priority list, cut the bottom 2% like we did in the 90s in North Dakota every budget cycle, and then we take those automatic cuts off, and Leon Panetta can live with that, I suspect.
All right, I want to move on to another topic.
Sure.
As you know, Senator Heidi Heitkamp's been traveling across the state of North
Sure.
touting this Violence Against Women Act. If that Senate bill were to hit the House floor, would you vote yay or nay?
Well, we're going to vote. We're going to have a chance to vote on it probably this next Friday. I have some concerns with one aspect of the bill. I want to support the Violence Against Women's Act. It's very near and dear to me personally, as you might know. We need to get the funding into place so that the shelters and the advocacy for victims is in place so that women continue to feel empowered, have enough, courage and incent that courage, and then a safe place for them to go. There's a little bit of a constitutional question about a couple of words in there. I think we can tweak that a bit, make sure it can withstand the constitutional scrutiny so that we don't end up throwing out the whole bill with one little mistake. But by and large, I think we'll get it
So if that
passed.
language gets changed, you would vote yes?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who's a former Attorney General, did vote yes on this, obviously, completely, essentially abolishes the Sixth Amendment. Are you in some way, shape, or form saying, hey, maybe she doesn't know the Constitution as well as we thought?
I'm saying that there are lots of reasons for people to vote for certain bills, especially in the first House. Remember that oftentimes it's the second chamber that fixes bad legislation from the first chamber. There were attempts in the Democrat-controlled Senate to amend the Violence Against Women Act. There are some wonderful minority opinions. I've read them all. I've read the bill. I've read last year's bill. By the way, the Violence Against Women Act is not new. It's been around since 1994. Right. It passed last year. I'm kind of amused by all the
Senate.
Yeah, I'm kind of amused by all the hoopla, but by the fact that it passed again. But nonetheless, it's gotten a high profile, and I'm hoping for a bill that we can vote for, and I think we'll get her done by
just a moment ago. You talked about how important the security of children is.
Yes.
As you know, there's going to be a town hall meeting coming up on Spirit Lake this coming Wednesday. The BIA essentially said today, we're going to leave it up to the tribe if this is going to be open to the public or not. I want to get your commitment tonight that you're going to do whatever you can and make sure that that meeting is open to the public this Wednesday.
Well, you won't find a politician more transparent than I am, because I quite frankly think that if you're willing to give up the First Amendment rights of people, which means you ought to be transparent in your expression, and they ought to have an opportunity to express themselves and hear from you, then if you're not a public official or a public institution willing to withstand that transparency and that scrutiny, then you're in the wrong business. So I will do everything I can to make sure it's
So I've got in my hands right here part of the 12th mandated report from Thomas Sullivan with American about Care for Child and Families. Talks in here about what's taking place here with all the pedophilia, people being forced back into homes with these pedophiles, sexual offenders. I did the same thing with Senator Hoeven. I'm going to give you the same chance. I want you to look into that camera right there. There's people from Spirit Lake that watch this show every single night. I want you to tell them what you're going to do as our congressperson to ensure those parents and those kids that they are going to be safe from these sexual predators and no longer be raped every single day on that reservation.
Well, let me tell you one thing I would do for sure, and I've said this to many of my Native American friends, and I've got a lot of Native American friends, especially to the men on the reservation. Listen. Members of Congress will do all that they can. I'll do all that I can. Our federal government will do what it ought to. But welcome us. Don't just say, we're going to be sovereign on these areas, and we need your help here, but we don't want your help here.
This is from the 12th mandated report. I've got a report here where a 13-year-old girl is raped by a 37-year-old man. Law enforcement gets called. Basically, FBI agent Sema gets involved. He calls the mom back and says, oh, you know what I found out when I talked to this gentleman? He said it was consensual, so there's no report. That's from the BIA, our government.
Right.
And you just told the people you're going to do whatever you can to make sure our government does this.
That's why we have hearings. That's why we have these, what ought to be transparent town hall meetings. But they ought to be transparent. They ought to have the officials in place that will answer these tough questions on the spot, and they ought to answer them to the moms and dads of these kids and to the children themselves. In many cases, it's the dad, by the way, that is the perpetrator. That's part of the problem. You have a clash of cultures and a clash of two sovereign nations, but we've also got to do all we can to protect the children. That's number one. And if that means taking the child out of the home, taking them off the reservation to save the child, that's what we ought to do.
But then there's no funding going to the foster parents. That's part of the problem.
And that's a big part of it. Chris and I, as you maybe know, we're foster parents. We've adopted a little boy that was in a similar situation. This is near and dear to us. Protecting children has got to come first. But that means tribal leaders, swallow your pride. If we're going to take a child and give them safety, it might be off the reservation. Children first, corrupt governments not.
There is a lot more that goes to this, as you know. Kevin, always great to have you. Stick around. We want to get your feedback because coming up in our last segment, we're going to get to your questions and comments for Kevin himself. He's willing to stick around, so we'll get to those as well. Coming up in just a moment, a very special Feel Good Friday segment. My question for you is, do you feel the Valley does a good enough job to help and support disabled people in this area? Special guest coming up, and as always, please join our conversation. Go to 630POV.com.